He said the fate of Iraq hangs in the balance, and he put on display not only some specific steps he plans to take now, but also his sort of philosophical view of what's going on there. The specifics the president announced: 300 U.S. military advisors will be going to Iraq. And clearly, some of them will be working on intelligence efforts to try to deal with the violence there now, sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the region, as well as to Europe, to try to build some sort of effort towards a political solution. The president ruled out any U.S. ground forces of any significance beyond these military advisors going in, and suggested the possibility in the future, perhaps, of what he called targeted and precise action in terms of airstrikes. That's something, though, he's not announcing at this point. I think, John Heilemann, the thing he didn't talk about directly, didn't address directly, is his degree of support for Prime Minister Maliki. But I think a lot of people will read in his words, both in his statement and in his response, not a lot of confidence that Maliki is the right person to end the political divisions that he thinks are really the cause of the problem.
I believe asked 3 times, essentially, given the opportunity to offer an endorsement to Prime Minister Maliki, not given, given instead in a very tepid kind of support. So no endorsement. He says that this is at his doorstep. He's not the man. He was asked, is this a unifying force? Would not say yes. Did not say he could be a unifying force. Merely said it's really up in the hands of the Iraqi people and their leaders to try to come together. That is one of those big headlines coming out of this is surely going to be what is going on behind the scenes. That is his public posture. What is going on behind the scenes, and at what degree of leverage the U.S. has to try to get Maliki out? Because it's clear that though the president would never say it publicly, that is what the U.S. would like to see happen. Would like to see Maliki go and a more unifying figure in that role.
The last question he got about Iran and whether Iran can be a productive force, a force for good there, and obviously talked throughout the press conference about the region and the volatility there. How much do you think the president sees today's, or how much would you view today's announcements as a holding action? How likely is it that he's going to have to come back and deal with issues like Iran, like Syria, like the question of military strikes?
I think I think this entire press conference is a big holding action, and I think there's not, given given how minimal the intervention is that he's described in terms of, as you described, Mark, no ground troops, airstrikes are still being held off in abeyance. I don't think what he's proposing right now, I think most military experts would say it has very little chance of changing the dynamic there. And if the dynamic does not change, and that dynamic on the downward spiral that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the president is going to have to come back to that, because this is a very big, very serious threat to U.S. security. If Iraq turns into the old Afghanistan with al-Qaeda having a stronghold there, that is a profound threat to U.S. national security.
Let's go up to Capitol Hill in Washington. Phil Mattingly, our colleague, is there covering the other big Washington story today, which will unfold over the course of the afternoon. The House of Representatives, the Republicans picking some new leaders there. Phil, the president met with congressional leaders yesterday, talked about these issues. That meeting seemed to be pretty collegial, and yet I couldn't help but notice that moments before the president came out to spoke, John Boehner, Speaker of the House office, put out a press release, the headline of which was, "The wheels are coming off this presidency." And one of the elements they listed was the situation in Iraq. How restive are Republicans and, to some extent, Democrats about the president's posture before the press conference, and to the extent you can anticipate it or have seen it since his announcement, what he said today?
Mark, I think at least from the Democratic side, very restive. From the Republican side, as you mentioned from Speaker John Boehner, not mincing any words at all. Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, also took to the Senate floor today to give his own speech on this issue, criticizing President Obama on foreign policy. Look, I think what you saw from the president today, post that meeting, is an effort to try and put on the table a coherent strategy. It's been what he's been getting hit by Senate and House Republicans over the last couple of days, and it's what he's been hearing behind the scenes, at least I've heard, from Democrats saying, look, if you're going to do something, let's at least put a strategy out there, even if it's just initial steps, like John was laying out. In terms of in the wake of this, it's going to be really interesting to see. Obviously, House Republicans pretty distracted right now with their leadership elections, but I think the criticism of the Obama foreign policy has kind of reached peak level right now, just a few weeks after his big West Point speech that was supposed to kind of lay out his doctrine. I don't think he said anything today that's going to set that back or recover in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's going to be really interesting.
Okay, Phil Mattingly up on Capitol Hill, and again, we'll be hearing from Phil throughout the afternoon. We do have those House leadership elections. But to summarize, President Obama, after some consultations over the weekend, and then with a big national security meeting today at the White House, has come forward. 300 U.S. military advisors going to Iraq to work with the current Iraqi government. No airstrikes as of now, Secretary Kerry to the region, and clearly President Obama's main focus is trying to find an Iraqi government that can actually try to deal with some of the sectarian divides which are fueling the problems there in the military conflict. Not a lot of faith behind the scenes, as John Heilemann mentioned, in the current government.